Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on this Wednesday, the 5th of February. I'm Douglas MacKenzie, bringing you stories from Scotland and around the world. To discuss what's behind the headlines in those stories, I'm delighted to be once again joined by Maureen Watt. Maureen, as I'm sure you know, was a long-time North East MSP in the Scottish Parliament, Minister in the Scottish Government with responsibilities including education and skills, and from last year, the SNP President. Welcome back, Maureen.
Thank you, Douglas, and good evening. Hope you're well.
Very well, thank you. We begin this news programme, as we begin all our news programmes, with the latest from Ukraine on this day 1078 since the full-scale Russian invasion of the country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said he would agree to direct talks with Vladimir Putin to end the war. That is the only setup in which we can bring peace to the citizens of Ukraine and not lose people. Definitely we will go for this setup, adding that he would also require other participants to be present. If people believe we must move to the diplomatic track, and I believe we are ready to move to the diplomatic track, there must be the US, Europe, Ukraine and Russia at the talks, Zelensky said in an interview with British journalist Piers Morgan. In the Morgan interview, Zelensky put Ukraine's war dead at 45,100 people and injured at 390,000. He estimated Russian losses at 350,000 dead and between 600,000 and 700,000 injured, with many Russian forces missing in action. A Russian strike killed 5 civilians, including a pregnant teenager, and wounded 55 on Tuesday in the town of Izium in Ukraine's northeastern Kharkiv region, partially destroying the city council building, officials said. Russian shelling killed 2 civilians on Tuesday in different parts of southern Ukraine, officials said. Prosecutors in Dnipropetrovsk region in the southeast said 1 person was killed in the district east of the major city of Dnipro. A drone attack by Ukraine sparked a fire at an oil depot in Russia's Krasnodar region, Veniamin Kondratyev, the governor of the region, said early on Wednesday. International lawyers have, quote, laid the foundations for a special tribunal to try Russia for the crime of aggression. The EU executive on Tuesday declared a breakthrough that it said would mean the Russian political and military leaders who bear the greatest responsibility would be held to account. Ukraine said there had been a recent surge in queries from Russian families seeking information on missing soldiers, indicating huge losses for Moscow on the battlefield. Since it launched the hotline in January 2024, it had received more than 60,000 requests for details of missing Russian troops. Out of all inquiries, 1,790 Russian soldiers were found to be in Ukrainian captivity, and 408 of those were exchanged. European and US ship owners have sold at least 230 aging tankers into the so-called shadow fleet used by Russia to evade oil sanctions, an international investigation led by the Dutch investigative outlet Follow the Money has revealed. The owners made more than $6 billion, that's £4.8 billion, selling their vessels into countries that have not sanctioned Moscow, such as India, Hong Kong, Vietnam, or the Seychelles. Many of the sellers were from countries with sanctions in place against Russia. Greek owners sold 127, the most. UK companies sold 22, and German and Norwegian owners 11 and 8 respectively. Most tankers would otherwise have been sold for scrap at a fraction of the price, John Henley reports. A former Conservative MP has reportedly joined the International Legion in Ukraine in a non-combat role. Jack Lopresti, 55, a former Tory deputy chair and ex-serviceman, said it was a huge honour and an immense privilege. Maureen, we've talked many times on the programme, discussed military moves and deaths in Ukraine. Now there does seem to be a little chink of light on the on the diplomatic side, and particularly in that there seems to be something in it for Trump, with him talking about access to the rare earth metals in Ukraine. So is this hope or another false dawn?
Well, of course, Trump did come in saying that he would immediately solve this war, and clearly that's not happened. But one wonders whether once he has said what he's got to say on Gaza, and we'll come to that, that he will probably move on to Ukraine. So I would much prefer that other countries were involved in any negotiations rather than Trump, because if he comes up with something similar to what he did yesterday with Gaza, this is not going to go very far very soon. However, it does seem that President Zelensky is now willing, as he said, to go into talks with Putin. We've not heard whether Putin is similarly interested in doing so. But I think other parties other than the US must step up quickly to try and get some resolution before Trump comes in his heavy-handed way. And in the meantime, we are seeing each side in this awful, long, drawn-out war trying their best to gain as much impetus and territory as possible to go into any negotiations in a stronger position as they would see it.
Another question on the diplomatic side, and that was Kaja Kallas announcing yesterday, the chief diplomat for the EU, now that the EU will set up a commission to investigate the crime of aggression against Russia. Is this something meaningful? I mean, she described it as a forerunner to anything which could happen in the Hague, because any humanitarian crime flows from a crime of aggression. Is this just a banner, or can something come from this?
My honest answer is I don't know. I mean, we know that Putin's been Teflon in so many different spheres of activity. Whether this is just something else in the kind of precursor of talks, I really don't feel able to comment.
Okay, fair enough. We'll see soon enough. We turn now to the Middle East, and at least 47,552 Palestinians have been killed and 111,629 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October 2025, according to the Gaza Health Authority. Trump has declared that the US will take over the Gaza Strip, and that he envisioned a long-term US ownership of the territory after all Palestinians were moved elsewhere. Gaza, he said, could be transformed into the Riviera of the Middle East. The US president did not explain how and under what authority the US could assume control of Gaza. The UN Human Rights Office has said that Trump's Gaza plan would breach international humanitarian law. Any forcible transfer in or deportation of people from occupied territory breaches international law, the UN Human Rights Office, UNHR, said. Hamas condemned the proposal by Donald Trump to take over and own Gaza, saying it will fan the flames of Middle East violence. Hamas said in a statement that the proposal, aiming for the United States to occupy the Gaza Strip, was aggressive to our people and cause, won't serve stability in the region, and will only put oil on the fire. Jordan's King Abdullah said he rejected any attempts to annex land and displace Palestinians. In a statement, the Saudi government stressed its rejection of any attempt to displace Palestinians from their land, and said it would not establish relations with Israel without establishment of a Palestinian state. Meanwhile, Hamas condemned Trump's call for Palestinians in Gaza to leave as, quote, expulsion from their land. One Hamas figure described the remarks as absurd and ridiculous, while the Palestinian envoy to the United Nations said that world leaders and people should respect Palestinians' desire to remain in Gaza. Netanyahu described Trump as the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. The Israeli leader said, "We have to finish the job in Gaza," and said Israel will end the war by winning the war. Netanyahu praised Trump for, quote, "thinking outside the box with fresh ideas," and showing willingness to puncture conventional thinking. The Irish Foreign Minister, Simon Harris, said, "It's very clear the direction of travel here. We need a two-state solution, and the people of Palestine and the people of Israel both have a right to live in states safely side by side, and that's where the focus has to be. Any idea of displacing the people of Gaza anywhere else would be in clear contradiction with UN Security Council resolutions." And to go more deeply into the story which has dominated not only the Middle East but world news over the last day, Donald Trump has vowed that the US will take over war-ravaged Gaza and own it, effectively endorsing the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in an announcement shocking even by the standards of his norm-shattering presidency. Trump, who has previously threatened Greenland and Panama and suggested that Canada should become the 51st state, added to his expansionist agenda, claiming that it could become the Riviera of the Middle East. He declined to rule out sending US troops to make it happen. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative, the president told a joint press conference with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Tuesday evening. "It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down." Arguing that Palestinians could live out their lives in peace and harmony elsewhere, Trump continued, "The US will take over the Gaza Strip and we'll do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site." Later, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, wrote in a post on X, "The United States stands ready to lead and make Gaza beautiful again. Our pursuit is one of lasting peace in the region for all people." The announcement followed a surprise proposal from Trump, a property developer, earlier on Tuesday for the permanent resettlement in neighbouring countries of the 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza. He called for Jordan, Egypt and other Arab states to take in Palestinians from Gaza, saying they had no alternative but to abandon the coastal strip, which must be rebuilt after nearly 16 months of a devastating war between Israel and Hamas militants. Trump said he would support resettling Palestinians permanently, going beyond his previous suggestions that Arab leaders have already steadfastly rejected. Forced displacement of Gaza's population would be a violation of international law and would be fiercely opposed not only in the region but also by America's Western allies. Human rights advocates liken the idea to ethnic cleansing. The UN Secretary-General spokesman Stefan Dujarric, speaking to reporters, said any forced displacement of people is tantamount to ethnic cleansing. The UN Secretary-General believes that any solutions for Gaza should, quote, "stay true to the bedrock of international law and not make the problem worse," he said, adding, "it is essential to avoid any form of ethnic cleansing," and of course, he will reaffirm the two-state solution. First Minister John Swinney condemned President Trump's plans for Gaza as, quote, "unacceptable and dangerous," saying there must be no ethnic cleansing. When pressed on Trump's remarks at PMQs today, Sir Keir Starmer agreed that Palestinians must be allowed home. Well, Maureen, a columnist in, I think, The Independent today said that if a scriptwriter had come up with this idea for an American comedy show, it would have been slapped down immediately as too obvious a joke, too crass, and obviously in too bad taste. Does he mean it? Do you think?
Well, I couldn't believe my ears when I was, sitting up late last night and listened to this. I thought I was already, asleep and dreaming and had gone to bed. I mean, it was just so unbelievable. And then, of course, you wake up this morning to find that it is actually true. I mean, this man is clearly deranged or just completely narcissistic, that he cannot realize that, any sane person realizes that it's just unbelievable. Those who are saying that it's ethnic cleansing, I would tend to sort of back them rather than anything else that Trump's saying. He finds it impossible to separate his role as president of the United States from being a wheeler dealer and a property developer. I mean, to say that it could be a beautiful place, yes, it could be a beautiful place, but the Gazans could make it a beautiful place. He's treating people in such derogatory terms that it's quite unbelievable. I mean, imagine if he said to the people, Californians who've lost their houses, he said to them, "Oh, the place is in such a devastation, such a mess, and wildfires have got more prevalent. You're wasting your time going back there. Go and find somewhere else to go. The middle of the Utah desert or something." I mean, it's exactly the same sort of thing, isn't it? Am I wrong?
Well, I hope you're not
He
giving
is
him ideas there, Maureen.
he's so heartless, callous, and any sort of adverse adjective that you can think of. I mean, he has obviously never read anything about Middle East politics and Middle East civilizations or anything to come up with such a crass idea. Yes, it's a difficult problem to solve. And I mean, I couldn't believe, I was watching Netanyahu all the time, how did he really believe him, or was he trying to keep a straight face? I mean, this isn't a plan that could have come up with yesterday while they were just sitting talking. It must have been discussed, for many weeks, if not months before. So, I mean, as I say, the only thing I can agree with them is that, Gaza, as we've talked about many times, has been razed to the ground by Israel. We knew that that was their long-term plan. But the ideas that he has for reconstruction are just unbelievable. Well, not often I'm lost for words, but honestly, I was last night.
Other than the effect on the Palestinians, Americans are often probably unfairly criticised for not getting irony, but Trump is talking at home about clamping down on immigration and stopping people coming in to the United States. Yet here he is expecting Jordan and Egypt to take in a vast influx of Palestinian refugees, and they, of course, are terrified that it's going to totally unsettle their own political and economic lives.
Yes, I mean, he clearly hasn't got any idea of the geography or the political geography of the Middle East. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself in any way knowledgeable about it, but he's got no idea of, as I say, that people are different. I mean, is he just lumping everybody together? Got no historical context here or anything, and to expect other countries. I mean, are they supposed to create new cities in areas that they haven't created cities before, or what on earth is he thinking about? I mean, I can't see any Middle Eastern state agreeing to anything like this. Can you? Because as you said, that it would upset the balance in their own states, which is sometimes very fragile. I mean, has he discussed it with any of the other Middle Eastern states? I doubt it. There must be reeling from what he's saying, because very few of them, if any, have come up and commented on his plan. So, as so far anyway. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully it's a one day wonder, a one day idea of Trump's that will die a death quickly.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope it goes the way of the bleach. But I mean, he said everyone loves it, but as you say, everyone so far has criticised it, at least in the Middle East. To stay with an American metaphor, something from left field, as they say. I was speaking to a US journalist friend today who, unsurprisingly, is becoming more cynical every day. And she said, maybe all of this foreign policy stuff that Trump is doing, tariffs and initiative for Gaza, is simply a smokescreen to blind people in America from him and Elon Musk dismantling the US government and the traditional separation of powers between the executive, the judiciary, and the Congress. Um, I don't know. You're a long-term political observer. Do you see something in that argument?
I think that could be possible. I mean, what's the word that they use in terms of this blitzkrieg of actions that he's taking? There's another word for it that's used by the media. I can't remember what it is, but um, yes, I mean, while this is going on, Elon Musk is completely dismantling huge departments like US aid. Um, Employees are being sent home on long term leave, apparently at the end of this week. So, I mean, people have said that he's a dictator, and this maybe is what dictatorship in um, the largest country of the world looks like. And as you say, because he has control of all the levers of state and majorities in both houses and in the US Supreme Court, maybe he thinks that he can get away with this. And he clearly has support still. You don't see, people rising up against this. And, if you take Gaza, for example, the far right Jewish community have been very vocal in supporting what he's planning. So, and the Democrats seem just kind of blown away by everything that is coming out of his mouth. So they don't know where to start in opposition to him. So I think it's really important um, that the West, the rest of the West, and thank goodness that Canada are standing up to him and Mexico, the rest of us need to step up too. And I think one good thing that can come out of this is that Keir Starmer will have to work more closely with the EU.
Yes, you would think so. Thank you. Turning now to Scotland, and INEOS announced 400 jobs to go at Grangemouth. 400 workers at Scotland's only oil refinery have been issued with redundancy notices. The INEOS refinery is scheduled to close by this summer. Trade unions have been campaigning to keep the plant open to give time for it to transition to the production of hydrogen or green aircraft fuel. The UK government did not include any funding or support for the Grangemouth refinery in its recent growth mission announcement, which did not include any projects in Scotland. Responding to today's news, Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said, "It is deeply regrettable that Petro Ineos have issued redundancy letters today to the dedicated and highly skilled workforce at Grangemouth. The Scottish Government believes that refining at Grangemouth should continue, and a premature closure of the refinery is fundamentally short-sighted and detrimental to the transition to net zero. We stand ready to support everyone impacted and have announced dedicated skills support for those facing redundancy. And we will continue to do everything we can within our limited powers to secure a long-term future for Grangemouth." However, the UK government has so far failed to live up to its commitments or offer any assurances about the future of Grangemouth and its workforce. We continue to urge the UK government to bring forward real investment to save Grangemouth and the jobs, businesses and livelihoods which depend on it. I suppose the key phrase there is Kate Forbes saying within our limited powers. Sharon Graham, the Secretary General of the Unite Union said today, while decrying the failure to wait until the ability to create safe aviation fuel is available, that the UK government and the Scottish government were missing in action on this. One can understand her frustration, but is there anything realistically the Scottish government can do?
Well, again, I can't remember the name of it, but there is an action. Well, there is work being done, isn't there, on an action plan, which I thought the unions were involved in, between the UK government and the Scottish government, to come up with a plan for Grangemouth, which I knew was going to take a few months, and I suppose nobody had thought that INEOS would start issuing redundancy notices now, but I suppose we shouldn't be too surprised. I mean, this is, if Labour government don't take any action, this is them deliberately deindustrialising Scotland. The fact that Scotland is the oil and gas producer of Europe, are going to be without an oil refinery is absolutely shameful, while there are still refineries in England. The prospect of having a place for producing green fuel for airplanes, I think, is something that is going on in other countries, and Scotland could be at the forefront of this. And we could also, if successive UK governments had taken carbon capture and storage seriously in Scotland, we might not be where we are now. But that vast site in the heartland of Scotland cannot be allowed just to go into disrepair, like steel plants have in the past. And I think Labour will pay a very heavy price for this if they allow this to happen, because the Scottish government's hands are tied. Energy is not, something that they have control over, and we simply haven't got the funds to make any meaningful difference in this. So I think the unions, if they're serious about this, should really be laying in hard to Stammer and the Westminster government.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I understand that Grangemouth is not equipped to deal with the refining of North Sea oil because it's simply too heavy. But the safe aviation fuel, I mean, it seems to be a winner all round. It's so much in demand. It's every time you buy a ticket on KLM or Air France, they ask you to chip in a bit for safe aviation fuel. It's clearly something for the future. But if any of us refuse to sell, I mean, what can be done?
I know, but is it not also the destination for lots of LNG coming across the Atlantic? So why is that not being continued, or is it being continued? I'm really not very sure. But, it just seems to me that Keir Starmer really doesn't care about Scotland. I mean, this has been going on since he came into power and before that. But since then, and he's pooled money in AI at Edinburgh University, and the announcement last week had nothing for Scotland. Scots need to wake up to what is exactly happening under Labour, because it is just a complete continuation of what happens to us under the Tories, and something that I don't think most Scots expected of a new Labour government, and must be absolutely furious.
Yeah, well, I'm sure people's memories are not so short that they've forgotten Labour in Scotland's pledges to save Grangemouth before the election, which has disappeared like snow off a dike.
Yep, absolutely. I think that we've only seen one Tory Labour MP standing up and speaking about this, is Brian Leishman, I think. So, but he seems to be a lone voice.
Staying with UK politics, and the UK Treasury has told several government departments to prepare for their budgets to be frozen in cash terms ahead of a major spending review planned in June. Ahead of the general election last July, Labour repeatedly denied that there would be a return to austerity in the UK, with the Labour leader in Scotland, Anna Sarwar, saying in a TV debate, "Read my lips, no austerity under Labour." Since Labour came to power, however, public finances have been under pressure from high borrowing costs and stagnant economic growth. Departments are in the process of bidding for funds from 2026 to 2029, with unprotected areas like justice, culture, trade and local government at risk of being squeezed. The SNP has warned the Labour Party against imposing swingeing austerity cuts to public services and Scotland's communities amid a massive hole in the Chancellor's spending plans. The warning follows the Office for Budget Responsibility giving the Treasury the first official estimates on the state of the UK economy before the Chancellor's spring statement next month. Economists have warned the UK government's budget plan for £9.9 billion of fiscal headroom has been wiped out as a result of stagnant economic growth, soaring UK borrowing costs and higher than expected interest rates. Commenting, SNP economy spokesperson Dave Doogan MP said, "Voters were promised there would be no cuts, but the Labour government scrapped the winter fuel payment within days of getting into power. And now there are growing warnings that more cuts are coming down the line. This must not become yet another broken promise from Keir Starmer, and families in Scotland must not pay the price for the Labour government's failure on the economy." The Labour Party boxed itself into this position with its bungled budget, the damaging national insurance tax hike, and the political choice to stay out of the EU single market, which is wiping billions of pounds from the UK economy and public finances every single year. The Chancellor must urgently reassure families and businesses that the Labour Party will not be taking the axe to public services or imposing even more cuts and tax hikes to plug the holes in its plans. So, Maureen, the economics have not really changed since the government changed. Still more austerity, and added to that, as Dave Doogan was saying, that the Labour Chancellor has boxed herself into a corner with the national insurance rises in the budget, raising costs for business everywhere.
What strikes me is that Labour doesn't seem to have had a long-term plan for the economy at all. I mean, the budget that's just passed did give Scotland an uplift in funding, but then the next year they sound as if they're going to be taking it away. Now, that is no way to run a country, whether it's the devolved administrations or the departments of state. You just don't do that. So if they clearly hadn't factored in shocks that the economy might be subjected to, and also, have they had any modelling done on what the effect of tariffs, for example, might be, and did they do any modelling of what the effect on the economy would be of the national insurance rises? Did they consult the CBI, for example, and other business organisations before this happened? So they're only what they think is their only way to sort the economy is growth, but they're putting stops on growth at every turn. Seems to me that they're totally and utterly incompetent.
It does seem strange with 16 years in opposition that you don't come in with a coherent plan for growth. And I mean, the Labour Party loves focus groups. It must have had surely all the words necessary to drive, and it just as you say, it just seems like a complete shambles, their first period in government. Or is it the case that they're going to squeeze things so hard now, and then come the next election, they'll have created a kitty which they can have a giveaway, and a very nice, simple way of looking at politics and preserving power.
Oh, it sounds as if the cynicism of your American journalist friend has rubbed off a bit today.
Perhaps. Okay, and staying with the Labour Party, the Labour Party has restored whips to three MPs who supported the SNP two-child benefit cap motion. Reports are emerging that Labour has restored the whip to a further three MPs who voted against the two-child benefit cap. Ian Byrne, Imran Hussain and Richard Burgon were among 7 parliamentarians who were suspended in July for supporting an amendment to the King's Speech tabled by the SNP. The rebel Labour MPs have been warned that their readmission to the party would be subject to good behaviour. They had been sitting as independents in the Commons alongside Afsana Begum, John McDonnell and Zara Sultana. They all lost the party whip for 6 months last summer, after which their suspensions were due to be reviewed. Begum, McDonnell and Sultana will remain suspended pending a further review, according to the reports. Sultana, the MP for Coventry South, and Begum, the MP for Poplar and Limehouse, said they had learned of their extended suspensions from a media report. Sultana said on X, "Turns out speaking up for Palestine is still a punishable offence." Begum added, "Almost half of all children in my borough grow up in poverty. I want to be clear, I will always stand up for the people of Poplar and Limehouse." John McDonnell expressed his concern for his colleagues who remained suspended. He wrote on X, "Pleased my colleagues got the whip back, but disappointed Zara and Afsana haven't yet. Relaxed about my own position, as I've made clear I don't expect the whip back until we know whether police are to charge me following a recent Palestinian demo, after which I was interviewed under caution." The vote on the two-child limit amendment last summer was a source of contention across the House, with some Labour MPs pushed to tears as they were forced to vote with the government and support the cap, which came early on in the new Labour administration's term. Dozens of child poverty campaigners have continued to warn that more children would be driven into poverty as a result of a policy that was introduced by the former Conservative Chancellor George Osborne. It's rather an unpleasant phrase to be on good behaviour when that means standing up for the poorest children in society. But ultimately, does it make any difference when Labour has such a large majority, whether they have MPs suspended or not?
In a word, probably not. It probably doesn't make much difference, I suppose. In order to maintain party unity, the whips have to do their job, and there has to be some punishment. But they have to tread a fine line between, over punishment and making sure that they don't alienate too many in their party. I mean, not just in Parliament, but among their activists. So I think the suspension is what was expected, 6 months. It is regrettable, though, that those who are speaking out for Palestine are being doubly hit, if you like.
Yes, it does seem that the three highest profile MPs are the ones who are still under suspension. Now a story from DR Congo. Hundreds of women were raped and burned alive during the chaos after a Rwandan-backed rebel group entered the Congolese city of Goma last week. The female inmates were attacked in their wing inside Goma's Munsense prison during a mass jailbreak, according to a senior UN official. The deputy head of the UN peacekeeping force based in Goma, Viviane van de Per, said that while several thousand men managed to escape from the prison, the area reserved for women was set on fire. Images taken shortly after Rwandan-backed M23 rebels reached the centre of Goma reveal vast plumes of black smoke rising from the prison on the morning of 27th of January. Although details of the incident are scarce, the atrocity appears to be the worst of the recent M23-led conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. UN peacekeepers, however, have been unable to visit the prison to investigate further because of restrictions imposed by the M23 rebels, meaning the identity of the perpetrators remains unclear. On Tuesday, it emerged that about 2,000 bodies were still awaiting burial in Goma after M23 fighters seized Goma, capital of the DRC's North Kivu province, on the 27th of January. Van de Per, who is now based in Goma with thousands of UN peacekeeping troops deployed to protect citizens, said, "There was a major prison breakout of 4,000 escaped prisoners. A few hundred women were also in that prison. They were all raped, and then they set fire to the women's wing. They all died afterwards." This week, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights warned that sexual violence was being used as a weapon of war by rival armed groups in Goma. The city, home to more than 1 million people, is under the total control of M23 forces. But in an unforeseen development late on Monday, the militia announced a unilateral ceasefire. Until then, fears had been mounting that Rwanda was determined to take more territory from its vast neighbour, with M23 forces steadily heading towards Bukavu southwards, the capital of South Kivu province, 120 miles from Goma. Despite evidence to the contrary, Rwanda denies it is backing the M23 or that its forces have crossed into eastern Congo. However, Van de Per said her UN peacekeeping colleagues had spotted Rwandan soldiers during patrols. Van de Per has urged the UN Security Council to increase the pressure on Rwanda. "We really need to get back to the negotiating table, and that is only possible if the members of the Security Council and other important countries exert enough pressure on Rwanda and Congo," she added. Well, this is a horrible, horrible story wherever it happens in the world, but we should remember that Rwanda was the safe haven which was going to be used for British deportees.
I mean, my first reaction is absolute horror in terms of the women that were killed in this atrocity. And there is no other word than atrocity. I mean, I cannot understand why Rwanda, which is one of the biggest African countries in terms of landmass, wants to increase and take over parts of the DRC. I mean, the DRC and Congo have been at loggerheads for as long as I can remember. So why Rwanda wants to get involved, I haven't got to the bottom of it. Obviously, I haven't read enough about it. But for this to happen just reminds me how education is just not happening in terms of, you know, people understanding that doing this and carrying out these atrocities is just not civilized, and our schools in some places are just not addressing these issues, that the treatment of women this type of treatment of women can still carry out. I mean, we talk about women young girls not being able to go to schools when they have their periods. And it's all part of male-dominated societies that just do not respect their women.
It is a terrible story. Back to Scotland, and services providing local support for families will receive additional funding in the Scottish budget, First Minister John Swinney has announced on the 5th anniversary of The Promise. Following an agreement with COSLA, the share of whole family wellbeing funding provided to Children's Services Planning Partnerships, CSPPs, will increase by £6 million in the next financial year and remain at that level the following year. The WFWF programme aims to transform how families are supported so they can get the right help at the right time for as long as they need it. As part of the programme, every CSPP receives funding for their local area and can use their share to improve support in a way that best meets the needs of the families in their communities, such as more holistic support for parents with mental health or substance abuse issues, providing welfare rights advice, and delivering community-based family support hubs. Transforming the way families are supported is part of the Scottish Government's work to keep the promise to children and young people with care experience by 2030. The First Minister made the announcement ahead of a visit to the University of Glasgow to meet students with care experience, hear about their views on the promise, and discuss their hopes for the future. The First Minister said, "It's now 5 years since Scotland made its promise to children and young people with care experience, a landmark moment when we all committed to improving the support they receive and ensuring they have every opportunity to thrive. I'm glad progress is being made across the country, with the latest statistics showing a 15.6% reduction in the number of looked after children since 2020. The work we have undertaken has meant that a number of changes have been made in justice, in education and in health to support those with experience of care and the people who work with them. But I'm very aware that we need to do much more to address the complex challenges that still exist. As part of that, we need to create the conditions for innovation and change that best meet the needs of our communities, change that ensures families receive the right support at the right time and for as long as they need that support. Whole family wellbeing funding is making an important contribution to the work that will help us deliver on our commitment to keep the promise by 2030. Children's Services Planning Partnerships are receiving more of that money over the next 2 years because of their understanding of the services that will best support families in their local areas. Since becoming First Minister, and in my previous roles in the Scottish Government, I have spoken to many wonderful people and visited a wide range of projects supporting the promise. I feel privileged to continue to do this, and I look forward to hearing more from care-experienced young people about their hopes for the future. Maureen, when I hear the promise, the thing which pops into my head is the pledge, and how differently the promise has been implemented, with John Swinney following up with real actions and real money for community. So pretty much a good news story.
It is, and hats off to Nicola Sturgeon who started this. She took a real interest in care experienced children and looked after children, and a 15% reduction in looked after children is showing that it really is helping to keep families together. And since 2007, early intervention has always been one of the mantras of the SNP Scottish Government: early intervention and prevention. And obviously, keeping families together is the best experience for children. Otherwise, the incidence of trauma and other adverse childhood experiences kick in. So it is important that this area is given all the support that it needs, because it also, crosses over with the whole poverty reduction agenda. I just hope, my only hope is that there are enough trained people to make sure that we reach as many families as possible and identify families in this area, because I think that's one of the areas where perhaps too many families are falling through the net because of local government cuts and Scottish government cuts, services are stretched to the limit.
Yeah, and there'll be people who will criticise and saying, "Oh, it's throwing money away." But these early interventions have economic benefits as well, don't they? In the long term, save so much money on problems down the line.
Yes, and if we think of the fact that we haven't got enough people to do the jobs that are currently available in Scotland, if we have children and young people who are too traumatized to work and have mental health issues or whatever, then if we can do something to reduce that number, then we've got more people who can be economically active and benefit themselves and others from being economically active.
Yeah, thank you. A new modern prison in Glasgow to replace the 143-year-old HMP Barlinnie has been given the go-ahead by the Scottish Government. With the construction contract now signed, HMP Glasgow will have a capacity of 1,344, adding 357 more places to the overall prison estate once completed in 2028. The total project cost is £998.4 million. The prison has been designed to deliver fit-for-purpose, safe and secure accommodation that will improve opportunities for successful rehabilitation to help reduce reoffending while creating a safer working environment for staff. The project, which independent benchmarking shows is in line with costs for similar recent prison builds in England and Wales, will provide significant economic benefits both during construction and following completion. During peak construction activity, there will be over 1,000 people on site, with several thousand working on the project over the lifespan. There will be 50 new apprenticeships created within that workforce. Developer Kier Construction has committed to providing a range of community benefits, including employment for the local community, such as apprenticeships, training and work placements for ex-offenders, as well as supporting local businesses. Justice Secretary Angela Constant said, HMP Glasgow is a bold vision for the future of Scottish prisons that will help reduce reoffending, contribute to less crime, while delivering a considerable economic boost for the city and beyond. The new modern establishment will replace a Victorian-age prison that is no longer fit for purpose. It will increase prison capacity and transform how prisoners are rehabilitated, as well as considerably improving staff working conditions. Delivering the best value has been a key consideration of this project, which will provide more than £450 million worth of economic benefits, including jobs and contracts for businesses in Scotland. I very much welcome that at least 50% of project spend will benefit the local supply chain. Well, I suppose it's never great news that prison capacity has to be increased, but there is talk of it providing better pathways to prevent reoffending and an undoubted economic boost for Glasgow.
Yes, and it's part of, people and the media tend to forget about the ongoing delivery that the SNP Scottish Government has made since 2007, not only in the prison estate, but also renewing and rebuilding the school estates as well. There's been huge progress in upgrading the state of Scotland's schools, and this is just the latest in the renewal of the prison estate. We've had HMP Grampian and HMP Inverness, and clearly Barlinnie is a much bigger project. It's a huge old Victorian prison, as you say, and it's probably bigger, definitely bigger than the other two I've mentioned. So getting the contract signed for that is a big step forward. It's been talked about for ages, and hopefully it will be a boost. The building of it, the construction of it, will be a boost to the economy of Glasgow and the surrounding area. And it will be built to include, as you said, Douglas, a lot of areas will be included in the buildings in relation to rehabilitation and reduction of reoffending. So it's a good news story in many aspects.
Final story tonight, we turn again to the Scottish Government's top priority of eradicating child poverty, and a new fair funding pilot to deliver on that will provide additional multi-year funding in the form of 45 grants to organisations across Scotland. The funding, subject to budget approval, will support projects in areas including health, education, poverty and culture, and have a total value of £61.7 million in 2025-26 and £63.2 million in 2026-27. Speaking today on our visit to the Gathering, the largest third sector event in the UK, Social Justice Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville said, "I know many charities faced with rising costs and falling donations need more security and stability to enable them to plan and develop. Child poverty in particular requires longer-term interventions to help achieve the solutions we want to see. For that, the third sector needs financial stability and certainty. That's why I have prioritised delivering on our commitment to provide more multi-year funding where we can to support the vital work of the third sector in Scotland as part of our fair funding approach." The pilot is the first step in mainstreaming multi-year funding agreements more widely across the third sector. It will give organisations the ability to plan for the future and make the most of the resources. The pilot's focus on grants connected to tackling child poverty and the delivery of frontline services to our communities will maximise the impact of longer-term funding and support the delivery of our number one priority, eradicating child poverty. Well, that, Maureen, may go some of the way towards your concern about having people with the right skills to tackle child poverty.
Yes, of course it will. But I was just thinking, I mean, this is an area kind of fraught with difficulty because, it's a pilot to support charities. Now, one of the things, I mean, often people do not realise that the government does support charities. It's not just charitable giving by individuals and companies and fundraising, that the government does give money to charities because they're better at doing work than government agencies. But nevertheless, these charities we have to make sure, in terms of good use of taxpayers' money, that these charities are able to do the work for which they're being paid. And sometimes, regrettably, some are not living up to deliver what they promised they would. So it's very difficult for a cabinet minister in this area when they're talking about fairer funding pilots. I would almost bet on it that in the next few days and weeks, there will be some charities saying that their funding's being cut. And often it's because, they're just not delivering as I say that they promised when their contract was given to them. So, yes, this is a really good announcement of new money. So new money means over and above the existing money. Charities, for example, like Aberlour, do a huge amount of work in helping families that are facing difficulties, and nearly always with really outstanding results. I've heard of children who have not come out of their bedrooms for years and not gone to school, and yet, there are wonderful people in charities like Aberlour who manage to eventually get through to them and get their trust and manage to work wonders, and to the huge delight of parents and carers in this area. So, yeah, I hope this money is well spent.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, of course, there are always journalists who are poised to look at money being misspent and make a story out of it and blacken the whole third sector. But fingers crossed. Well, that's it for this evening, Scotland at 7. Thank you very much to our guest, Maureen Watt, for her insights as always. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We raised £20,000 from April to the end of 2024, 16,000 short of our £36,000 target. We had to borrow £12,000 to enable us to pay our bills and survive, but the pressure is still on, and we need to find enough regular donors to give us financial security. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around £2,500. We need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debts as well. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. So thank you again to Maureen, and thank you to you for watching. Please join us again for our evening news programmes tomorrow and Friday, and for Scotland, the Full Scottish on Sunday at noon. But for me tonight, good night.